So hi everyone, my name's Al and I'm one of the community managers for Sanctuary Shattered Sun. Today I'm joined by someone who will be known to everybody in the community. It's our Sanctuary developer, Special Bread. Good morning, how are you doing?
Doing terribly, thank you very much.
Excellent.
Let's get this show on the road. There's some exciting news, which is that by the time you are watching this video, we will have just put out our second Steam page on the game demo. So there's going to be a free demo for Sanctuary for everybody to play, and that's coming next year, okay? But because of the Steam algorithm and the gods of the Steam things and so on, and Gabe and whatever, we have to, the best thing for us to do is to actually have two pages, one for the main game and one for the free demo. And so it is now everybody's solemn duty to please the algorithms and to wishlist the game on Steam as fast as you can. There should be a link down below in the description. And that would really help us out, and because there'll be things like play tests coming out soon, and then eventually it'll be released early next year. So you want to be on the notification list for that, so you know when it goes live. But if you want to actually play it literally right now, then you could do that through our Patreon supporters. So tiers 4 and 5 actually get access to the pre-alpha like kind of build of the game, and just to be clear, we don't buy the game, don't play the game. It's not ready to be bought or played. But if you really want to support us, right, then that's something that you can, and it's just people always ask us about that. So that's the exciting news out of the way, and let's get on with the rest of the video, because Al, I think you've come here to like Spanish Inquisition style interrogate me about all sorts of questions. So, don't burn me at the stake, but let's go.
Well, that's absolutely right. In preparation for this, I asked our Patreon supporters if they had any questions that they really wanted answered, and I have a selection of things to go through. But before we begin with the questions, for those who don't know what Sanctuary is, can you just tell us a little bit about the game?
Yeah, sure. It's just going to be only the best RTS ever made. But yeah, this is a large-scale strategy game. If you've heard of things like Total Annihilation or even Supreme Commander or Bar or Planetary Annihilation, it's that kind of family of games where you have your thousands of units, everything's simulated physically, and you'll be able to play it in single player and multiplayer and all that stuff and get all the fun out of it. And the bit that's special about us in particular, right, is we're set on the surface of a Dyson sphere, right? It's this hollow planet that's around the sun, if you don't know what the Dyson sphere is, and you may have glimpsed it on the footage, right? In the main menu, there's the sphere with the Earth with the sun, and actually you can shatter the map that you're playing on, and everybody literally falls down into the sun, and there's going to be some weather things as well where you can freeze the map because all the weather's artificial. So that's the game. We're working hard on the game. We've been working on it for about 4 years now, and somehow some people say that the game seems good. So there we go, and that we're just trying to make a good game. That's all. That's the game.
You're doing really well so far. Before we begin with the Patreon questions, there's one question that comes up every 30 minutes across all of the social medias. How is Sanctuary lit? If the sun's on the inside of the Dyson sphere, why is there sunlight?
I mean, how are we lit at night? It's the same thing, basically, right? So, because here's the thing. Everyone else is wrong, and we're right. That's how it works in everything, but in this case too. So, and what I mean is that typically in a sci-fi depiction of if you've seen Dyson spheres, like in Star Trek or whatever, they have the sun on the inside, then they have a giant sphere around, and all the living areas on the inside, right? That's wrong. That doesn't work. What happens if you try doing that, you'll actually fall into the sun because gravity is pointing towards the heaviest thing, which is the sun. And the weight of the sphere is actually cancelled out. It's very clever, but the maths says that it doesn't work, okay? So we do the thing that actually works, and you have to put things on the outside of the sphere because, like, just like we're on Earth, I claim that the Earth is not flat, and gravity points down, and we're on the outside of the Earth, and so we're standing on it, and that's okay. And so, in Sanctuary, it's the same thing. You're on the outside of the sphere, and you're standing on it, and that's okay because gravity is pointing towards the sun. Now, how do you light things when you don't have the sun or the sun is in the way of something? Well, you use artificial lighting, of course, right? And in our case, it's going to be very fancy artificial lighting, but in a way, it's artificial nonetheless, which is there's these ginormous kilometer-long apertures in the sun, right? I kind of pointed with a small one, and I was going to say these tiny apertures, but they're only tiny because the rest of the sphere is so big. Right, and then they let light out through the sphere, and then there's these giant orbital mirror complexes and arrangements that actually simulate the day-night cycle in various parts. So, you'd have like frozen environments, you'd have desert environments, temperate kind of environments with the trees, because this whole thing was built to sort of resemble the climate of Earth, because it was made to be like a giant living sort of accommodation. It all went wrong, and in some places you get environments which don't exist on Earth at all because they're not really supposed to be there, but a lot of things aren't supposed to be there. Some of them are like nuked hellscapes, some of them aren't finished, so like you have like blocks of ice ready to be shipped into seas and stuff, but they're not ready yet, so they're just kind of there, and things like that. So there's a lot of things we're planning right now, but yeah, that's basically a little bit about the Dyson Sphere, how it's lit, because it's true, everybody asked that question, and fellas, just stick to the principle. We're right, everyone else is wrong. That's how it is. There we go.
So from now on, Sanctuary is right, everybody else is wrong, and we're sticking with that.
Yeah, what could go wrong with that approach?
Oh, nothing at all, I'm sure. Let's move on to some questions then from our Patreon supporters. Are you ready for a bit of a grilling?
Never was, never will be. Let's go.
Okay. So the first question is, how are the air units for all of the factions coming along? When should we expect to see more of them in the pre-alpha?
Yeah, sure. So this is actually two different questions. So there's air units and there's air unit mechanics, right? So the air units and basically all the models are coming along pretty steadily. We've just got a steady stream of models coming along because we got a couple of artists on the team and they just make models, and the speed at which they make models is the speed at which they make models. So that's that. And then, we've got a lot of air units in the game already, right? Like models, and we've got two of the factions are done. There's a couple of things that aren't done yet because we were leaving them for later, like air transports. And so the real question is how are the air unit mechanics coming along? And there we've still got a bunch of work to do because we've been focusing on the ground mechanics, making sure that the tanks move well and feel good and stuff, getting the pathfinding right. And then the air units, they still want a bit of polish, and so air units can fly, right? That's good. They can turn around and things like that. And gunships, they can work too because they've got weapons, and air units have weapons just like tanks do in a sense, right? So we can just use all the same mechanics there. However, bombers are not quite ready, where they can fly, but they don't have this kind of advanced bombing behavior, because here's the thing, if you're making a physically simulated game, you kind of want to figure out a way to drop bombs, and in real life what happens is the bomber flies and the bomb drops, like it inherits the velocity of the bomber and stuff because it drops at the same speed. So if you see all those World War II pictures, you see the bomber and it's got like a line of bombs and it's vertical. That's because the bombs are flying at the same speed as the bomber is, right? So, and that means that you kind of, you really have to aim your bombs, right? And in real life, in history, you used to do that with things like dive bombing and stuff, because that used to make it easier to actually hit the target. Because otherwise, how are you supposed to do it, right? Or in real life, these days, you use things like guided bombs and so on to really get them on target. So It's a problem that you got to solve in real life, and since we're trying to physically simulate that, we've got to solve that in our game too. And we're just looking at different approaches, and various games have done it different ways. It's pretty challenging, especially when you're trying to hit a moving target. It gets a lot harder. So we've just kind of been like, we know it's a big deal, and we've seen a lot of other games where they solved it to, with varying degrees of success. There's drawbacks and advancements, because if you just make the bomber hit the target every time, then it's kind of not that fun either. So it's not so simple as like we just make it really, really easy. So there's a lot of stuff to do, a lot more experimentation to do, but otherwise, there's always some improvements on how air units are handled, and we've got a couple of mechanics that we want to put in, like we've got a visitor coming in, Mr. Cat. He's just under the table. Well, we might see a bit more of him in the near future, who knows? But there we go. So, and that's how the air units are. So there's your update there. Next question.
Next question. Oh, actually, I'm sure I saw a Tier 4 experimental gunship as well. Is that correct?
That's true. Oh, yeah, we've got one, but actually, yeah, we're planning on adding not one, but two more. One for each other faction, and those are going to be some good things in there. They're going to be quite different from each other. Faction diversity is always really important, so here we go. Mm-hmm. And you just saw him in the background there. Look at that. He's blurred out, but he's there. And now he's going to mess up the bed, no doubt, because one thing he likes to do is he likes to sleep under the blanket. So when I make the bed in the morning, it's all nice and smooth, and then you get the cat, and then he's deciding. He's currently deciding on whether he wants to mess up the bed or not. Well, since we're on tape, let me try and catch him for the cat tax. So. Here we go. He said something.
Did he say, go and wishlist Sanctuary?
Yeah, no doubt about that. So that's that guy. Yeah, okay. He's suffering a lot of abuse from me, because every time he's on the camera, I normally don't pick him up like that. So he's like, what is this guy doing?
This is strange and unusual behavior.
Yeah. So there we go. All right, carry on.
So your next question. What do you consider the most key one or two things that make a strategic RTS work?
Wrong question. What are the 150 things required to make an RTS work? That is the correct question. So here's the thing. Imagine a car, and you've got what is required to make a car work. Well, it doesn't have an engine, it won't drive. If it doesn't have any petrol in it, it won't drive. And if it doesn't have a steering wheel, I guess it could drive, but you won't be able to steer it. And if it doesn't have any wheels, it won't drive. And so actually, when you think about it like that, it's like, well, you need all of those things to work. And for an RTS game, it's a similar thing. You need a good game engine. You need it to be performant. You need it to support your units. Your units need to handle well. You need to have an economy. You need to have base building, and so on and so on and so on. And all of those things need to be done, not okay, but great, because we're trying to make a great game. And if you have a great game, or a game that's good in some aspects, but it's bad in others, you've made a bad game. So it's, that's the kind of ambitious task we set for ourselves. We're trying to make a great RTS game. And that's the trouble. It's actually, it's not one thing, but if I had to pick one thing, we have my favorite game designer, Mr. Jonathan Blow. He said a clever thing among many other clever things, which is that you need to be in good hands. And what does that mean? Well, when you're playing a game, you're playing the game, and then something happens. and you're thinking, well, what is that? What is this strange thing that just happened? You know, maybe it's a black screen, or maybe something, and you think, is this supposed to happen? Is this a bug? I don't know. And so you have to guess, right? And so if you're in good hands, if your game is smooth and it looks really polished, and you can tell that there is a great deal of care that was put into making the game, then the thing that is weird, you will assume that because probably everything else is good, this is fine too. This is not a bug. The screen went black because I'm about to enter a cutscene or something, right? But if your game is full of bugs and you can see that it was slapped together and the care wasn't put into the game, you don't know that you're in good hands anymore, right? You can't trust the game, and we have to earn the player's trust in order for you to be able to just sit there and play the game as it's meant to be played, and not wondering if you're really if it's really even working or something. And so there's kind of this point at which the game's not good, the game's not good, the game's not good, and you keep working on it, and then it kind of crosses this invisible line or something where it sort of begins to come together, right? And then that's the point at which you've earned the player's trust, and that really is something that you have to put it. In order for the player to think you've put care into the game, you have to actually put care into the game, and that's what I claim we are trying to put care into the game. So that's like, if I had to pick one thing out of the 150 absolutely necessary and unskippable things, this is the one thing that kind of brings it all together and, let's say, characterizes what makes an RTS game, or even any game, good. It's that you have to put care into the game and make sure that the player can see. You've communicated to the player that he's in good hands, and that you are worthy, as the game creators, the game is worthy of his trust to play the game.
And you can't pretend either, can you? Because gamers are very astute and they work things out, and they know whether it's pretense. They can see care and they appreciate.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you try it on, they'll see through it, and now you've broken their trust. And I mean, that's even worse than if you tried it badly, and they'll be like, "Oh, well, at least you tried." Here, it's like you try to pull off. I don't. To be honest, I'm not sure how you would do that. Like, because if you have a really bad, I don't know, but this is kind of more abstract. You just see the game and it's like, okay, it's got like a veneer of things, but all the mechanics are bad or something. Like, people will just say, oh, it's a game with bad mechanics, because they can see it. So I don't think you can fake it.
No, you can. I suppose yeah. on one level, it's if something looks exceptional, and somebody's drawn to the flashy graphics, but then when they start playing and it's mediocre or lackluster, it's like, well, you've pulled a fast one here. You made it look wonderful, and it isn't.
Yeah, and I guess there are, like, I'm not really well versed into deceiving players into thinking that we've got a game, so I don't have much experience with that, I claim. But yeah, like, there could be ways. Anyway, I don't care about that. We're trying to actually make a good game, so there we go.
Good. Okay. Next question.
Yeah.
Okay. What has been the most challenging aspect of designing each of the factions, and do you plan on adding more in the future?
Yeah, good question. So, there's always one challenge with designing factions, and that is that you have to put in faction diversity, and not just the kind of fake faction diversity where that they're just reskins of each other. You actually, if you want to make a great game, you have to make some great factions. And so the faction diversity, it's, again, if you want to have some great factions, you have to have some great faction diversity. And so it has to be real and meaningful, and they have to have real differences in how they feel, how to play them and something. But at the same time, you don't want to make them too different, because one of the things that we want in our game is to kind of give more control to the player. And for example, StarCraft, what a great game. However, Sorry, StarCraft fans, but I think that one thing you can't do is you can't just transfer your units to your allies. I think you can't do that, and there's a bunch of RTSs where you can't do that. But in our game, we want you to be able to do that, and that's because maybe you want to go for a break, or there's some kind of strategy where you just say, okay, I'm going to build the units and you take care of them, or whatever, right? So there are reasons to do that, and we don't want to constrain the players if we don't want to, but that adds a whole level of difficulty, because imagine this, right? You have the tank faction, which has really good tanks, but it's balanced because it has a drawback because it doesn't have any good air or something. Then you have the air faction, which has really good air, and then it's balanced by the fact that it doesn't have any good tanks. Well, if you can transfer units from one ally to another, you get the tank faction, and the other guy plays the air faction, and then they just smash their units together. You give them all to one player or whatever. Or, the air, you just send factories to each other, and now you get both. You get the best of both worlds, right? And now your army is unstoppable because it's better. Like, the drawbacks that were designed into the individual factions no longer apply. And this is a real issue that happens in a bunch of games where this transfer thing happens. And so there's kind of a limit at how much, like, what kinds of faction diversity and just how much of it you can have, because otherwise you're inviting this kind of gameplay, and generally speaking, people frown upon that, and so if that's the best way to play the game, then you're kind of making it a little bit less enjoyable, because you're removing the faction diversity again, because now everyone's playing the mixed faction, right? And so it's always this really delicate balance, but that's like the real constraint here, because we have all sorts of ideas for mechanics and stuff, and you have to pick the right mechanics. You can't just pick, every time I go and I have units, and then maybe every time one of my units gets killed, it sends like a mine at the enemy, and you have to click on the mine before it lands on your units, otherwise your units die too. Like that's like, I'm just thinking of the most annoying mechanic you could think of, right? And now you're just annoying. Like, there's all these things flying at you, and you have to like click on them all the time. You have to catch, it's like you're playing like Fruit Ninja or something while you're playing the game or something. It would just be ridiculous, right? So that's an example of an annoying mechanic, and maybe there's one place where you could do it, but it would be very limited in scope, because if you try to put it everywhere, you'd ruin the game. And so a lot of mechanics are actually like that, where it's very strong. It's very kind of like strong as in, it changes the game a lot, and it changes it in a way that you don't want it. There are mechanics which change the game a lot, and they change it to the way we do want it. For example, doing damage to enemy units. We have a lot of units that can deal damage, like tanks and aircraft and so on, and that's fine. That's what this game is about. It's about like arranging your units and giving them orders and then dealing damage to the enemy. That's totally good, and we're having that. Spoilers, we're having damage dealing units in the game, right? And so you gotta be careful as to which mechanics you put in and how much of them there are. And one thing we've been thinking about is kind of like non-multiplicative, non-transferable mechanics. Like, it's hard to really describe them, but for example, here's one. So the EDA, that's one of our factions, they have armor on their units, and armor is extra health essentially, but you can repair it for a cheap price, like for a small cost of alloys, and repair stations will exist that can restore the armor, and you can't normally repair it. You have to use these repair stations. So if you're playing against the EDA, you might want to get rid of those repair stations first when you're fighting them. They're kind of high value targets, and the EDA is like, oh no, well, I gotta defend those repair stations now or something, right? And now, like, it's interesting, and that's all great, and it makes the faction special, right? Because you kind of got these high value units on them, right? And as the EDA, you might want to be floating, like having a few alloys in storage before you go into the battle, because you could spend them to make your army stronger in a sense, right? Like, it's a temporary boost to your army for a permanent cost. That's kind of interesting. So, and we're not the kind of guys who, like, our principle is, if we're putting something in, we're going to let the player be creative with it. We want to put the tools in the player's hands. And so, it's not going to be a few units with armor. It's going to be every single unit in the game with armor, like in the faction, right? So your EDA power generator, that's going to have armor on it. If you want to tank enemy bullets with your EDA power generator, go for it. You can do that. If you can find a funny, interesting, creative way to use this mechanic with the tools that we've given you, then that power to you. And this game is about thinking of these interesting things and and all the kind of interactions that result from that, right? But here's the cool thing. The EDA have armor, and repair stations repair armor, but the Chosen don't have armor on any of their units. It's a faction-specific mechanic. And the Guard don't have armor of any of their units. So you can transfer your repair stations to your Guard ally, and his repair stations will repair your units just fine. You'll just use your Guard player's resources, and that's okay, because that's presumably what you wanted to do. And then he can upgrade it for you, and so on. But it won't boost the Guard player's armor because they don't have any armor. And it's the same thing for the Chosen. They've got personal shields on their units, so the Chosen, they're much more about energy, and if you stall, you're going to have a bad time. And so, you'd overbuild their power grid is a little different as well. Like, I think we had an idea for an upgradable power generator for them and stuff. So, they're the kind of energy, they're the energy faction, really. But again, and they have all kinds of mechanics and very strong things and so on. They've got personal shield boosters, things like that. And again, it's something that doesn't transfer to the other faction, so that when you give it to your ally, you don't get ultra personal shields on your EDA tanks and armor as well. Like, you don't get both. So that's the kind of things that we're looking at to really make those factions play and feel different. And just for completeness, the Guard have transmitters and receivers, and there are transmitter towers and mobile transmitters. And then every single Guard unit, as you probably guess, has a receiver on it, and when it receives the signal, it boosts Guard units' regeneration, right? And it boosts their vision radius and their intel radius. So you can, if you wanted to spend some extra energy, you could put your transmitter next to your radar and get a little bit more radar range and stuff. So, again, it's pretty different. And each faction, right, we've designed it so you can turtle with it, you can be aggressive with it, you can eco with it, right? But you do it in slightly different ways with kind of its own twist on the formula. So, again, it's all about maintaining a balance, because if you have three completely different factions, right, one, it will go really weird when you start transferring them, but also it's just kind of hard to learn the game 3 times, right? So they've got a little bit of familiarity, so if you don't play the Chosen much, right, you might not know all the intricacies of how the shields behave, but you kind of know, like, if I build enough power and I build enough factories and stuff, I'll be okay. Right, and that's kind of a lot of what this game rolls around. So that's the challenge there, right? It's to make the factions diverse and interesting and feel unique and play well with each other and alone, without needing to run into this problem where every team game has one Chosen, one Guard, one EDA player on each team.
The other part of the question was, will you be adding more factions? And I want to just...
I totally forgot about that. No, not planned at the moment. And again, the reason why is because the more factions there are, the less room you have for faction diversity for each faction. If you have, like, imagine 100 factions, yeah, it's just gonna, there's just gonna be too many to keep track of as a player, and they're all gonna be, they're just gonna have every which kind of unit, and you'll have a lot of similar factions between each other, so it's quite difficult. And, it's not that other games can't do this, because other games, there's things like Age of Empires 2 and stuff, right? And so, there's reasons why you would have a lot of factions, right? It's just in our game, we're kind of focusing on, this interesting, diversity. And so we picked 3. We could have picked any number of factions when we designed the game, but we specifically went with 3 factions to kind of... 3 is a good number, because 2 factions, if you have a strong tank and a weak tank, then they're opposites of each other. But with 3 factions, you can have three different tanks, because one of them could be strong and weak, the other one could be weak and cheap, and the third one could be strong and fast and expensive or something. So, you know, there's a lot more kind of it's not ever, you know, you're not comparing things on a line, you're now comparing them in a triangle at the very least, and now there's a lot more space to have like these interesting things and going on. You can actually make them really special. So that 3 is a good number, and then more is just getting, it's kind of starting to eat into the diversity of the other factions. So that's why we went for 3.
And I suppose you've also got balance issues, haven't you, as well, if you introduce more factions, because each faction has to be balanced against the other.
Yeah, that's true. I think that is possible to do, but the solution isn't very nice, where like you just have slightly less faction diversity when that happens, right? And then like each successive faction kind of starts looking as like, oh, you know, this one is just like that one mixed with that one, right? You know, like the 4th faction will be somewhere in between the EDA and the Chosen, or it'll be in between EDA and the Guard, or between a mix of all 3 or something, right? Like, you know, there is, and so maybe in the DLCs, or like who knows what the future of Sanctuary will bring. I don't know if we'll have DLCs. I don't know if anything, but well, I mean, we have lots of ideas, right? So and if people like the game, if the game takes off, who knows what will happen? We might have like, you know, all sorts of things happening. So maybe in the future, but we're certainly not planning for release for more factions, no.
Okay. The next question then is, will you keep the spirit of Total Annihilation and Supreme Commander? Will the game focus on macro scale so much that micromanagement aspects will be low?
Another 2 questions in a trade code. So
they're very greedy. They're very greedy, these Patreon supporters.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. They just want to... Well, they're just trying to get their money's worth, so...
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I mean, well, you know, whether we follow the spirit is really ultimately up to the players to decide. We think that we're just trying to make a great game, and, you know, if you guys... I mean, let's be realistic here. A lot of our fans come from the Total Annihilation, the, you know, Beyond All Reason, the Supreme Commander, the Planetary Annihilation fan bases, right? And they kind of recognize our game. And, you know, we talked to Chris Taylor, right? Chris Taylor made Supreme Commander and Total Annihilation and stuff. So, you know, let's be realistic. Our game is a kindred spirit of those other games, right? And that's we're pretty proud of that, and that, you know, we love those games, and we love a lot of other games too. So we're trying to do good by the RTS community, right? We haven't had a good RTS game like those other games for many years, and we're trying to do something which you know, has fill this hole in all of our hearts, right? This is the game we've always been waiting for, and we never quite got for, you know, when was the last one? 2014, something, Planetary Annihilation, right? So, you know, so yeah, that's that. And then micro versus macro. Well, here's the thing. Our game has physically simulated projectiles. And what does that mean? Well, it means that you can move any individual tank out of the way of any individual projectile if you're fast enough, right? And like stuff. So that's a lot of micro. You know, you could be, if you were like a godlike gamer or whatever, you would be able to individually micro every tank and dodge every bullet and so on. Or like, not every bullet, but, you know, but the vast majority of them. And in practice, that wouldn't happen because you just don't have enough APM for it. So, you know, it's always a balance, right? You know, apologies, StarCraft fans, but our game is not exactly like StarCraft, right? So it doesn't have 400 APM requirements. We've designed it to be actually quite easy to get into. Not to say that we're, you know, it's always... When you hear something like that, it's always extremely, well, I mean, there's always this thought like, oh, you know, have they dumbed down the game? And the answer is no, right? So we're really trying to keep the depth so that, you know, if you're okay, you can kind of play the game at an okay level. You know, it doesn't really matter what you do, but you won't be like completely rubbish, right? Mm-hmm. But if you want to be really good at the game, then you got to know exactly what you're doing, and you got to know every single unit and all the things they do, and you got to micro and just use every advantage that you can in terms of decisions, knowledge, like actual clicks and things like that, and build orders and all the rest of it. You're going to need to use every advantage you can, right? And all that kind of depth and the nuance it's all there. It's just we've designed things such that if you want to get into the game and you're a casual player and you just want to give it a try and you don't really care about, playing that well or like being competitive and stuff like that, you can just have a fun time of the game before you don't need to learn too much, right? Like there's all these things are there, but they're not like, you must do things in this order, otherwise you will be branded a loser for life, right? Like it's not, we don't want that, right? We actually want to, we have a range of players. We have a lot of players who are casual gamers who aren't that fast with their mouse, right? And we have a lot of competitive gamers, and we're just trying to, you got to be realistic, and you got to say, well, look, a lot of players, everybody wants to play RTS games, I claim. So you gotta, and we're trying to make a game that fits to a lot of players. So that's our plan. There we go. I think micro won't be an issue at all. There's so many opportunities for micro to take the advantage. Some of the stuff that is happening in the replay you're seeing right now. This is a replay by one of our top players. Right now in the pre-alpha build, he's playing on the hardest difficulty. So it's funny how quickly this happens. I thought it wouldn't happen for a while because we had some pretty good players on our game. On our team, sorry, and this guy's just better. He just, it didn't take long. We haven't even released the game. Usually when devs release a game, there's a few weeks when the devs smash everybody and then players catch on and they learn to play the game, and then the devs never beat anyone else ever again. But, we got there before we even started the game, so that's pretty funny. And, like this guy, he's not spending too much on his APM, but there are a couple of, sometimes you can see him microing some units here and there and stuff, right? But it's not like, it's not required as much as it is in StarCraft, where you have to move and stop and move and stop and move and stop all the time. So that's a very long answer to that question. So next question.
It was a good answer. We'll give you points for that one.
Yay!
Next question. Setton's Clutch is such a fun map in Supreme Commander. Will you be bringing it to Sanctuary?
Absolutely not.
Next question.
Never. I mean, of course, the joke is those who know. But we have a debug map, which is called the Forge right now. That's a working name. I think it might be called Twin Lakes later or something. Who knows? That map looks a little bit suspicious. I'll just leave it like that. But I swear on everything that is good in the world that we tried to make a lot of the things we do are built from the ground up. They're from first principles. We're just saying, like, what would we make in a fantastic RTS game? Like, what would we do? And so, that map that we have in the game right now looks a little suspicious. And I swear that we did not try to do that. We all this stuff's like, oh, we were really inspired by, by this or that. Like, we don't really work like that. We just try to think about it. And, there's a lot of examples and stuff, but sometimes you just arrive at something that looks remarkably similar despite your best efforts. And this really is a case there, because I was like, man, we need a map, and we need some land battles on it, and we're going to need some water on it, because we want to test naval units as well, and it's going to, we're going to need to test like team games, and our largest number of players we want to support for now is 4 versus 4, so 8 players, and then that means we'll need a 4 versus 4 player map. And then it's like, okay, well, if it's got water on it, there's only a few things you could do. You can have an island in an ocean, right? Because it has to be connected by land, because you have to have land battles. Or you can have a lake, or you can have 2 lakes. And if you have 3 lakes, that's too many, because it starts taking up map, like, you know, space on the map, and the land zone gets thinner, and so we have a strip of land, we have two lakes, because two lakes is more interesting than one, because otherwise you have two strips of land and then the land battles don't get, like, you know, put together and stuff. And so, you know, and then you like, well, which direction does it go in? And it's like, well, it can either go up, down, and diagonally, or the other diagonal, but like no matter how you spin it or try it or whatever, it just starts looking like another map, a certain other map. I don't know, we tried everything, or like, okay, so, you know, but there's just a limited number of ways you could do a map with two lakes. So I mean, that's how it is. And you know, again, by coincidence, we had a snowy map and we needed a green map, so we made a green map. I don't know, it's rubbish. I just wanna, I think that one should be like a desert map or something, just to make it look more different. But there we go. Absolutely never we'll never have a settings in the game. That's how it is.
But if somebody wants to use the map tools available, they could make their own, couldn't they?
Yeah, that's right. You can just load your own maps into the game if you wanted. You could even do that pretty much right now. It's not quite true because you know, we put the maps in a special place and so on, right? But like if you find it and stuff, so yeah, you could, right? And we've already got like a beta map editor thing. You know, that's how it is. But yeah, you'll totally be able to get your maps. Has many, and you know what we see is, the first thing people do is they port every other game's map into your game. So like if there's 5 other RTS games, you're just gonna get all the things. Like, you know, the classics are Saturns from Spring Commander, Shore to Shore. I believe that's a Total Annihilation one. Planetary Annihilation is different because, you know, your maps are planets and stuff, so it doesn't quite work there. But yeah, I've seen Command and Conquer 3 maps, I've seen Red Alert 3 maps, I've seen StarCraft maps, I've seen it all. So yeah,
Okay.
ported from one game to another.
No settings in Sanctuary. You heard it here first. Next question is, as a mostly single player, I would like to know more about what plans are coming for single players. Will we see a campaign, and how advanced will the AI be?
Yeah. So, I mean, it is time to break out a quote from a fantastic movie. I think Al will put a bit of the original in at the end there. You'll see where that's from. What a great time. But we have our top men working on it right now. Top men. So, you know, here's the thing. That's how it is. And you know, the end, when you make a game, you got to prioritize things, and you know, some things are really, really important, like the game working, right? Other things are also really important, like having a single player campaign and having a good AI for skirmish matches, because you know, a lot of our players, they want us to have a good single player experience. They're casual, they don't want to, you know, have multiplayer only and stuff. So we've assembled some guys who have, you know, they've got all the experience in the world. You know, everything, you know, we've done it all. We've done co-op campaigns. We've done AIs. We've got all the things, and you know, they're working on it right now. We top men. So
top men.
That's the answer. You know, realistically, in you know, you gotta make sure. There's a lot of production things when you're making a game, right? You gotta schedule things, you gotta, you know, make things in the right order, you gotta prioritize. And, you know, we're gonna prioritize the core game first, but the AI is being worked on, the campaign, tools, because, you know, you can't just make a campaign, you gotta make all the tools to make the campaign, all the things to place, all the units, all the objectives, all the stuff. You know, it's not being, you know, left around. It's being worked on, and eventually you'll be able to experience it too. And you know, there's so many exciting things going on, so many cool ideas, and you know, it's just a case of getting it done. So that's it. Top men. Next question.
What would you say has been the hardest obstacle so far?
I mean, here's the thing: when you're making a game, you have to constantly. It's not just one thing. It's just obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. There's something every week. There's something every month, every week, every year, and you just gotta juggle that. It's like you're juggling 15 plates, and if one of the plates falls and smashes, you can't make the game anymore, right? Like something happened. You ran out of money. Like key people or whatever. Like who knows, right? And you got to make sure that all that is going smoothly, and you have to make the game, right? You have to make sure that you have, like, not only are we, keeping things together, but you have to, right, really have some good momentum. You have to do a lot of work every month, every week, every day, because otherwise, if you're just chilling or whatever, then the game will never get done, and we have to make the game. So, and there's a lot of game to make. There's a lot of things to do, and we've been working on it for quite a while. We've been keeping it together so far, and I claim things are going quite well. So, and you just gotta keep everything. You gotta herd all the cats and make sure that they're going and everything's there, and you gotta catch all the plates, and you're balancing the egg on your nose at the same time, and that's one rolling off, and you put it back on, and and all that stuff. And that's kind of what it's like to run a studio. You gotta take care of everything, because if any, here's this is true wisdom about to come. If you never think about socks, eventually you will end up without any socks. Right? Because that's how it works. And socks are not important. But eventually you will end up without socks. So, there's a lot of important things, but the unimportant things also need to get done. And that's how it is. And so it's not that there's one obstacle, it's that everything in between now and a released game needs to get done, and that means buying socks sometimes too. So that's how it is. It's not that there's one or two barriers. I actually sometimes you hear devs or like people say, oh, we just need to overcome this one thing and everything's fine, right? For us, I think we can. Like, I don't foresee any major things where like, oh, well, we can't do it. It's like, we don't need to like secure an AI lab with 1 billion GPUs in it, and then like, it's like, if we don't do that, we can't make the game or anything like that. Like, we have the team, we got the, we're on a good run, things are going good, and we just need to roll that ball all the way to the end.
Who's in charge of socks?
The sock master.
Okay. Is that 9?
I don't know. I guess, like, if you a serious answer to this question is that each individual employee is in charge of their own socks.
Everybody's responsible for supplying their own socks. Okay.
That's right. That's right. If you're responsible for your own sock supply here at Enhanced Media. That's how it works. If you think that's a problem, we can talk about it. We can raise it at the next meeting.
Okay. Are you ready for your final question?
Oh no! Yes.
Yes. So the final question is: in Forge Alliance, you could turn nukes or specific units on or off the game. Will you have a mod manager in the game to make this possible?
Yes. And that's it. So thank you everybody for watching. Okay. So, the answer is yes. We've got, we've had modding as a high priority right from day one. It was built into the game. And here's the trick: if you take care of things early on, and you say they're important, it actually becomes a lot easier to put them in. So we put in modding without really much extra work to put in the game. It would have been a phenomenal amount of effort if we made a game without modding, and then we wanted to put in modding, because then you're going like, oh, well, how much of this stuff do we need to redo? It's all this extra work. But here it's like, actually, yeah, that just goes in the modding. We're going to make that in modding because that's actually easier to make there than it is to make in the game engine. So a lot of these things, I really do think that, you know, the modding, it helps us deliver the game. So mod manager, absolutely, right? It's going to come much later because, again, priorities, right? Productions and things like that. We got to focus on the game. And if we don't have a mod manager right away, then, you know, you can even add one yourself because we can have a moddable UI and things like that. So, yeah, so totally planned. And, you know, with regards to unit restrictions, so you can switch on and off a unit, absolutely, right? And actually, we have a kind of debug version of that where, you know, there's just a file somewhere and it says, oh, you know, skip loading these and those units because, you know, not all of our units in the game are finished right now. So if you try to load it, it won't have a model, it won't have any scripts for it. So you know, we actually already have something like that, and then the only really the thing that's missing is some UI and some settings to load and save it, right? But absolutely, totally planning on it. It's going to come much later though, because you know, here's the thing: the game isn't ready yet, and we got to finish the game, and we got to take care of the socks too. So there we go. That's my answer to that question.
Socks are very important. That draws an end to all of the questions. Have you had a good time? Will you come back and do this again?
I don't have a choice, so I will come back.
I am the sock master. You will do as you are told.
See, he's taken it on. He's already got that responsibility now. Like, we haven't even had the meeting, but that's how it rolls here, fellas, everyone watching. You know, Al's now in charge of socks. If there are any problems, you come to him about that.
Only about socks, nothing else. Nothing else.
Nothing else. Right. So, okay. Thank you everyone for watching. I think that's all we've got for today. As mentioned at the start of the video, free demo coming early next year. Wishlist the Steam page, totally do it. If you really can't wait, but only in that case and not because you want to play the game, you can play the game right now if you back us on Patreon on tiers 4 and 5. And if you get to tier 5, you'll even get a copy of the game on release. But again, don't buy the game, don't play the game, bad. It's a bad deal. In fact, you know, if you wait until the Kickstarter also is going to come next year. The secret super clever plan is that, you know, the Kickstarter and the Steam demo, we're planning on launching those at the same time, so you'll be able to play the game demo for free, and then you'll be able to buy the copy of the game at a good rate and at the Kickstarter, and there'll be all sorts of rewards that we're working on to make sure that, you know, we're kind of just trying to bring the best deal to everybody that we can. And so back us on Kickstarter. Then if you just have too much money, only then should you support us on Kickstarter, on Patreon and on Kickstarter too. Yeah, right. Like, but you know, say if you're wondering, don't buy the game, don't play the game, but do wishlist us, do tell all your friends, and you know, if you wishlist us on the main Steam page and wishlist us on the demo Steam page. And that's all I got. Thank you very much, and what a exciting, terrifying pleasure it was.
Well, thanks for joining me. It's been appreciated. Ciao for now.
The Ark. I thought we'd settled that. The Ark is somewhere very safe. From whom? The Ark is a source of unspeakable power, and it has to be researched. And it will be, I assure you, Dr. Brody, Dr. Jones. We have top men working on it right now. Who? Top men.